Welcome to Technomics, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology and the economy. Hosted by Robyn and Jeremy Nelson, Technomics is brought to you by Insight. The host's opinions, while mostly brilliant, are their own.
Hello. Welcome to Technomics. My name is Robyn and with me, as always, is my tremendous co-host, Jeremy.
Hello, Robyn. How's it going?
Very, very good, because we have a very special guest today. Somebody I've been really excited to talk to, whose whose New York Times best-selling books have been something that have been really influential to me, and whose work I've admired for a long time. The one and only Jay Baer.
Hey guys, thanks very much for having me on Technomics. I am Jay Baer, Robyn, Jeremy. Let's do this thing.
All right, and there's a little extra energy in the room.
I love this.
It's fantastic. So today we're tapping into Jay's expertise, and that is digital marketing. So one of the things that we've been noodling is just how deeply it's embedded into the whole client experience, because you know, we're always being marketed to. Even if you're deeply loyal to a brand, they keep pushing. They're constantly getting disrupted, and they have to market to it.
Well, and even if you are a customer of the brand probably has some other new things to sell you too that you haven't already bought, right? It's like when you take your car in for an oil change, you're like, hey, would you like some floor mats? Because we noticed that, these floor mats are getting a little ratty. I mean, they're always trying to upsell you, cross-sell you, and that happens obviously on Amazon, but it happens in B2B and IT as well, and it should, right? It's much more efficient to sell more things to somebody who's already a customer than to create new customers from whole cloth. Absolutely.
Yeah, just the same conversation around like customer service, right? It's a lot easier to keep than it is to get a new one.
But you know what, Jeremy? We don't actually run our businesses that way. My new book, which comes out first part of next year, is called Hug Your Haters. And it's all about customer service and how customer service has changed so much in the last couple of years because of the rise of online customer service primarily, and that customer service is now a spectator sport. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we found in the research for that book is that globally, companies collectively spend about $500 billion a year on marketing and about $9 billion a year on customer service.
That's a little out of balance.
Well, and it's especially out of balance when every single person who's in business, who's been in business for more than maybe, a month, kids know this as interns, that it makes more economic sense to keep the customers you have than to constantly go back and try and get new customers. Like it's axiomatic, right? There's no debate about that. There's no counterpoint. It just is. But yet we don't actually run our businesses that way. I really believe that in a lot of ways, customer experience is the new marketing, more so than marketing itself. But we're not quite there yet.
And it seems kind of challenging, right? Because as we progress towards this electronic, consumerism, more and more every day, right? A lot of people are attracted to that medium because it puts up that wall. It forces customer service to be a spectator sport. And then you couple that with something like social media, where it allows people to basically just throw stones without having to engage in a true dialogue, right? And it just makes customer service even that much more challenging to deal with.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And part of it is that what people expect of customer service and even interactions with an organization in general is actually quite different depending on where and how they interact with that company. I did this huge research project earlier this year as part of the book, and I found that there's actually two main types of complainers, two main types of haters in the parlance of the book. The off-stage haters are people who complain in private, so phone and email primarily, and they want an answer. They want an answer. 90% of the time, when you ask somebody if they complain to a company on phone or email, do they expect the company to get back to them? 90% of the time they say yes. And I'm sure that's true for Robyn, it's true for Jeremy, true for everybody listening. If you leave somebody a voicemail or you call, that's like the social contract, right? Yeah. Like you expect that someone calls you back. Email the same way. If you email a company, especially a complaint, you expect them to get back to you. In social media and review sites like Spiceworks or G2 Crowd or those kind of things, or even discussion boards and forums, it's different. Fewer than half of all those people who complain in public, what we call the on-stage haters, fewer than half of those people expect an answer.
and get caught off guard when there is an answer.
Precisely,
Yeah.
right? What they really want is an audience,
Yep.
right? They're like, woe is me, I've been wronged. And then they want their friends to be like, oh, that sucks, right? And so it's a totally different dynamic. And you're exactly right, Jeremy, you nailed it. What happens is since they don't expect an answer, if you do reply to those people, it blows their minds and it wins their hearts. The opportunity to build customer advocacy when you reply to somebody who complains in social or in a discussion board or a forum or review site is enormous. It's a huge opportunity for business.
I totally agree. In my, CD past,
That's not compact disc. That's not compact disc past. That's SEEDY past.
I was the brand voice on social media and responsible for responding to those people. And I would always tell them my name because it really blows their mind, one, to get the response, and two, to understand that there's another human behind it.
Yeah.
That is a really, really powerful element for a lot of brands. And when you see, and this is a distinction that I'm only just making the connection on, when you see the viral reports about who won on something like that, it's usually someone winning as a human being. The people who lose on those is when they try and do it behind a logo and they don't have the human face to it.
Absolutely. I've said this before that if you do it right, social media allows big companies to act small again. And that's really, really important. Like that is a meaningful differentiator. And you're right. There's very, very, very rarely do you see a social media kind of crisis scenario or something blows up in somebody's face where they handled it in a very off-script sort of human way. That is almost never the equation. It's always something happened and they acted like a bully or they acted like a cyborg or they acted like a corporation. Mm-hmm. And then people are like, wait a second, man, this is not how I want to be treated. Whether it's B2B or B2C, it's immaterial. But when you actually treat people as people and you show them that, what all companies are is a collection of people. That's all it is. It's a collection of people. Mm-hmm. And when you allow that to kind of take center stage, it changes the dynamics because it's really easy to be mad at a company. It's harder to be mad at a person. It's just physiology.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to, just like kidnapping, right? One of the things that they tell you to do is continue to refer, to use your name and to force them to recognize you as an individual, as a person. And it's a lot harder to kind of abuse somebody when you recognize them as a fellow human being.
Jeremy knows more about the kidnapping playbook than I thought he would in this show.
Boy, the things you learn on Technomics.
Maybe the CD past is actually more of Jeremy's side
Who
than
knew
Robyn's.
that was going to unfold into a theme today?
That was not the transition I was thinking about there, but I love it.
The CD of Robyn, like a Robyn Sparkle type of a thing.
I love it.
With your mother.
That's funny. So all of this, the ability to respond. Well, first of all of this is prompted by technology. Let's just call that what it is.
Yeah.
All these psychological elements that we're researching, really have to do with how we as humans are engaging with technology, and then how are smart organizations using technology to go act like humans. So one of the major ways that we're doing that is with marketing and with brand voices. And we use a lot of technology, and we should. We have a whole solution around social media. We have a whole solution around publishing content. We have a whole solution around automation. And those tools are great, but tools are only as good as the people who are using them. And for the purposes of this discussion, those tools and the interactions that come out of them are only as good as the analysis of that data.
No question. We are in an unprecedented time as marketers and as business people and as technologists. We have access to things that were not that long ago unimaginable. An unimaginable amount of data, an unimaginable amount of software and reporting and things that when I was a kid starting out were like science fiction, right? We didn't have a laptop when I was first in business, much less the ability to do real-time sentiment analysis. So we have all this stuff, right? And that's great. But here's where we lose sight of it, Robyn. I see this all the time. We have to keep in mind that it's about the wizard, not about the wand. The technology in and of itself it doesn't matter, right? It's who is operating that technology and to what end, right? There's still a really important role for strategy. There's still a really important role for people. there's still a really important role for thinking, well, why do we have this software to begin with? Right? People ask me all the time, I want to get some software, or I feel like I should buy this particular software package. I'm like, well, do you even know like what you want it to do? We get so enamored by the whistles and the bells that we sort of lose sight of the fact that there's a different business case here. And ultimately, you can have the greatest software in the world, but if you don't have the right people operating it, it's not really going to get you very far.
It's funny that you say it that way, because we spend a lot of time in our conversations about that. I'm sure you spend, well, that's your job actually, is talking about whether or not people are using their technology appropriately.
Absolutely. Or the exact opposite, right? Where we're at the other end of the funnel, where someone has seen the bells and whistles show, and they're coming in saying this needs to be implemented, and we're continuously from the technology side saying what are our requirements, right? That is one of the biggest things to try, biggest hurdles to try and overcome is what are the requirements? What are you trying to accomplish? So we can make sure that we construct and architect this infrastructure to be able to support it appropriately. Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, we come up flat. Because just like you said, Jay, there is no direction, there is no process, there is no, understanding of how to take all the bells and whistles and turn them into something meaningful and effective for the budget.
Well, I think especially in digital marketing, where we've come so far so fast that a lot of times when you ask somebody what are the requirements, what do you want it to do, they don't actually know.
Making more money.
Yeah, I mean they're not. They're not really sure how far up is. It's like the great Henry Ford story. Like if you asked the customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? And I think we're sort of at that point sometimes in digital marketing. You don't know what you don't know because like stuff gets iterated so quickly now. You're like, I don't know, is that possible? Maybe it is.
Anything's possible.
Anything is possible.
You can do anything, you just can't do everything. And I think that's the real challenge of marketers today, is that there is so much possibility that it gets to be overwhelming. And in the process of trying to find out what works, we overwhelm our clients and we make the experience kind of awful sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, think about how much time marketers spend now doing software demos. Like actually kicking the tires on solutions, right? Or like, well, maybe this would be interesting. Maybe we should start thinking about using this. Like all the time, like lots of time spent just sort of considering different solutions. You know how much time I spent doing software demos when I was a young professional? 0% of my time, right? Because we didn't have any software, right? It just wasn't even part of the job description. And you're exactly right.
You know who's always been there? Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've always been there. They've always been part of the job requirements. And they're a really interesting case around digital marketing and their evolution, simply because of the platforms that they've expanded to. I think they really get the concept of iterate once everywhere.
Yep.
And I think what's interesting about Microsoft is that clearly, especially right now, when we look at the Microsoft of 2015, it's a very different, that whole iterative mentality is very different. You go back and look at like your Windows 95, Windows 98, the progression of those operating systems and the development cycle around that. It's very, very different from what they've obviously kind of moved forward through with Windows 10, where they're saying it's not done. We're releasing it because it's good enough right now, but it's a product that's going to continue to evolve and grow over time.
It's fascinating to see big companies like that, big companies like yours, taking cues from startups, right? Mm-hmm. To say, look, let's adopt a minimum viable product strategy and an iterative strategy and lots of releases. But what's particularly, I think, a great way to tie it back to Robyn's question is that the only way that works is if you're actually taking customer feedback in and saying, okay, we're going to iterate, not because we don't have enough development time to be finished, quote unquote, but because we're going to put it out there, we're going to collect actual feedback from users, and then in the next version, which could be a week from now, we're going to fix things or change things or adapt things. That is, of course, how it should always be done, right? Yeah. I mean, hey, how about this? What if we built products based on what people say they want?
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, and I think it's different too. Like if, as we talk about technology specifically, you go back 10, 15 years, and people may not have necessarily even understood what they wanted.
Yeah.
They did things. There was a way that they accomplished certain series of tasks, but they didn't even realize what technology could do. And now, just like you said, everything is possible. They're realizing that now. And so now, as these tools are provided, that platform is more important than ever, Jay, right? So to make sure that voice can get back so that the people who are helping to drive and iterate that product have that feedback and can address exactly what it is that they do want.
I liked what Robyn said about everything is possible. but everything's not possible all at once. And we see this all the time with clients on the consulting side of our business, where somebody, either our client or somebody else in the organization, says, since we do a fair amount of social media work, well, how come our company's not on Instagram? We need to get on Instagram. And that's a really common, some executive read something that says, how come we're not here? My kid's on Snapchat. How come we're not on Snapchat? Whatever. Happens all the time. And even in a content standpoint, how come we don't have a better SlideShare program? How come we don't have an awesome podcast like Technomics? This happens all the time. And the answer should always be the same, which is, what do you want us to stop doing in order to do that thing? Mm-hmm. Because unless you're going to increase resources, by definition, if you're going to add something else is going to get less attention. And so modern marketing, more than ever before, is about choices. It's not about opportunities, because the opportunities are endless and everywhere. It's about choices. It's about, we have the time, the resources, the personnel, the money to do these 4 things. If we're going to add a 5th thing, we either need to throw out a baby with the bathwater, or we need more people, time, dollars, whatever. And that sort of series of choices is really economics. It's marketing economics. That series of choices is not something that marketing has really had to do in that way for a long time. So it's challenging right now.
Markenomics?
Markenomics. New show.
I smell
a new companion show.
Smell a spinoff.
The Frasier of
the Frasier of Technomics. I love it. Markenomics. There you go.
I have delivered on bad puns. My job is done here. For every yes, there has to be a no, right? Yep. And I think that's one thing that we've really challenged ourselves with. And the more information, the more analysis that we're able to do, the better we get at giving the right yes and therefore the right no. So an example would be with email. We know that we send out a lot, and we don't want to overwhelm people. We want to be utilitarian in nature with what we share with them, pursuing a newsletter strategy. What are the technologies that are supporting that? And, how are we deploying it, and what are we getting back from it? And what changes are we making to make sure that it's still the most viable and appropriate vehicle for the content that we're sharing? Simultaneously, how is that tracking all the way through the funnel? I think that kind of visibility is probably the most impactful thing to marketers, because that's what's developing the use cases for just about any tool, where we started out with one thing and we've ended up with something else completely.
Yeah. Email in particular is really challenging because everybody does it, right? It's probably, there's only 2 marketing tactics that really every company cares about: email and search. That's it. Mm-hmm. Everything else is circumstantial. And so everybody has email. Very few people are saying, what I want? If I could do one thing, I'd like to get more email, if that's a possibility. If I could just get more email, that'd be great. Nobody says that, right? So it is hyper competitive in a way that almost nothing else is. The competition for attention in the inbox is incredibly competitive. And so you're exactly right, Robyn. You're starting to see organizations think, well, maybe more isn't more, or maybe the status quo isn't the right way to go about this. Maybe we should fundamentally change the way we do email and say, well, what if we led with value instead of leading with an ask? What if we gave, and then asked instead of ask? And that's a really interesting concept. It's a very utility style approach. What you find in many marketing departments, though, is, we think that might work, but we're too scared to try it, right? Because we're beholden to whatever historical email program we have, which generates some revenue or some whatever. And we don't want to lose that. And that's dangerous, because you talked about, Jeremy, Microsoft's culture of iterative testing. Same thing is true, or should be true in marketing, if not more so, right? Which is, I don't know the right answer, but I know how to find out, mm-hmm. right? That's the right approach to all these kind of questions. There is no right answer. There's a righter answer. But you can only really find that by trying it.
One of the other interesting things that we're finding is the amount of data that this analysis and this content generates. A lot. And that can be A, overwhelming, and B, technologically difficult. forget how much we said we generated as an organization in terabytes of data a year. But let's just put it this way. There's now a program to help us deal with that. The first step is acknowledging the issue, and we're taking steps to help resolve the matter internally.
Yeah, we had our own intervention.
We did. We totally
Data
had
intervention.
our own intervention.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's just between us. That's just between friends. That's not even the number of people who are, B2B marketers themselves and trying to get Jeremy's time for a demo on something.
Yeah, it's incredible. What's scary to me is that we talk so much about big data. I mean, books and conferences and podcasts and everything else about big data, but big data isn't really the answer or the problem. It is just
a function.
It's just a function, right? It's big understanding, right? Because it's data. Data equals insights is really what you're looking for. If your data doesn't equal insights, you got to back up the horse, right? And be like, well, wait a second, what are we trying to learn here, and how can we learn that? The fact that we have terabytes of data, it's like, well, neat. Like, you can't eat data. You can't pay your mortgage with data. You can only use that information to become a better, smarter marketer. And where that really, I think, where that rubber meets the road is in relevance, right? It's all about relevance, especially in B2B. We talked about, every B2B buyer at any level of an organization is just getting hammered with offers all the time. And so it's all about, do you know that person better? Do you understand their circumstances better? Can you be more relevant to them? Because every marketer in the world, especially B2B, but all marketers tell themselves the same lie. And we all tell ourselves this lie, which is our customers are too busy to consume our stuff, to interact with us, to open our email, to read our ebook, to register for our webinar, to listen to our podcast. We always say that they're too busy. And that's totally not true. It's not about how busy they are. Well, if somebody tells you that they're too busy, what that really is a code word. It's a code word. What it really means, they just don't want to say it. What it really means is you're not relevant enough to me. Because when you give somebody something that is truly relevant, that's spot on, when you send them the perfect email, when you give them the perfect webinar, when you produce the perfect podcast, it's remarkable how fast that time surfaces. Relevancy creates time. And that's where data is so important if you use it well, because you can use data to be a sharper marketer, not to do more stuff. It's not about more data equals more marketing. It's about more data theoretically should be less marketing because you can do it more relevant, more sharply, more impactfully.
What's a technology that you're using that helps you be more relevant?
What is a technology that we're using that helps us be more relevant? We use a software package called Inbound Writer, which is a partner of ours. And Inbound Writer does predictive analytics on content creation. So it does a very, very deep analysis of our website and our blog over the thousands of blog posts that we've published in the last 8 years, connects to our Google Analytics, also does analysis of our target audience personas, et cetera, et cetera. So when I write a blog post or any of our guest contributors write a blog post, we do 10 a week on our site. We actually use the tool and we say, here's what we're thinking about writing. And it does a predictive analysis of that topic will succeed on your site, or that topic is unlikely to succeed on your site. And since we started using that particular package, our traffic is up 30 or 40%.
Wow, that's impressive.
Well, because the whole business of blogging and content creation has changed a lot. When I first started doing a blog consistently 8 years ago, you would it was more like the album era for music, right? Where this is a blog that I read. I read this blog and I subscribe to this blog, maybe through RSS or email, and I read every single blog post that these guys publish or this person publishes, and it's not really like that anymore. It's changed a lot. Now it's much more like the singles era, right? It's like Spotify or iTunes, where you don't necessarily read a blog consistently the way you used to. You read the hits, and you discover hits oftentimes in social media. You see it on LinkedIn, you see it on Twitter, you see it on Facebook. You read the ones that break through. And so as a media company owner, what we're trying to do at Convince and Convert is create more hits. Right? And if you can create more hits more of the time, then you actually have a much greater success opportunity with content overall. And that's why we want to use predictive analytics to hopefully give ourselves a better chance of breaking out, the same way that Netflix uses predictive analytics to do shows now with House of Cards and things awesome. Like that, right? That whole idea, we use the same kind of idea for blogging.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've subscribed to, right, like going back to the whole blog days, there's a couple like web video series that I've been watching literally for probably like 9 to 10 years now. And, I've listened to their podcast, and they've gone over as well how, the analytical data that they're able to get out of YouTube and some of these other kind of like middleware tools can tell people exactly, is there a common spot in this particular episode where people stopped watching, or they hit the share button, or, their ability to tap into their own individual components of the content and be able to identify where they either lost engagement or gained engagement is pretty phenomenal.
It's one of the things that's frustrating about podcasting right now, actually, as huge as podcasting has become, and I'm massively bullish on it. We do 5 weekly shows now at Convince and Convert, and 2 more coming online. You don't often have that same kind of intra-show metrics yet for podcasting that you do on a YouTube, and that annoys me to no end, because I would love to know which segment really resonated with people, and how can we do more segments like that in the future, that kind of thing.
And you think the technology's there, right?
It's coming.
Everyone's broken apart the podcast apps to be their own standalone applications. You have the the metadata and stored inside the MP3.
It's coming.
Yeah. So
what other technology challenges? I know I have my own litany of them, but what other technology challenges do you see in your space or with your clients?
We talk to a lot of organizations, especially on the B2B side, about the power of off-domain content. That, of course, you want to have your stuff on your .com or whatever, but really, if you're really talking about top of the funnel stuff, it probably should be in other places as well, like YouTube and a podcast and SlideShare and LinkedIn and tracking off-domain content and then figuring out how that contributes to actually lead gen and sales is difficult. Not impossible. Requires a lot of rigor and a lot of tracking URLs and tagging and things like that. But that is a question that we get asked a lot.
I think that is that's the tipping point, right? So we have gone through this evolution. Everyone got online. Everyone had a website. We've moved into digital marketing, and that statement right there is the tipping point into digital business.
Yeah.
So that's the solution, I think, is that entirely digitized presence and methodology, philosophy about how to understand how you function as an enterprise in the digital world. I think a great example is basically anything we do with retail.
Mm-hmm.
That omnichannel approach from back end of the house to front end is the way you have to operate for any sort of success. If you don't understand what's happening online and you're not able to translate that into your physical store,
it gets tricky to track it, right? To say, okay, how do we tie together your digital and your retail, or your on domain and off domain? It is, of course, all possible. It increases the level of complexity of the math side of it quite a bit, to the point where people are like, wow, I think we're going to need to put analysts on this just for this piece of it. And sometimes marketers are like, wait a second, man, I just want to make cool ebooks. Like, I didn't know I needed a PhD in statistics. I was like, well, I'm sorry to tell you that
only if you want to sell your books.
Right.
Only if you want to make a living off of
it. Big surprise for me as somebody who majored in journalism and public relations that I would be doing so much math at this point in my life.
Yeah.
And having to have such a complex understanding of. Great example, something that I always think of. So I just came home from Spokane, Washington after visiting Gonzaga. Hi, Zags. And I got into the airport and my phone lit up with the response for my ticket on my phone from Southwest. And immediately, because I am in the technology space, I was like, whoa, what kind of networking infrastructure sat behind that they were able to pick up my,
right.
near field frequency? And that kind of stuff, the things that are cool in their tactile nature, their very seamless integration into your experience, have to be well thought out and networked somewhere that you can't see.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is, like you said, it's the tactile. It's what brings you really close to them. But the scary part is where does it get creepy? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's real easy to cross over that line of almost anticipating and providing something to your customer before they need it versus kind of lurking.
That's right.
And just being there to kind of pounce.
In the immortal words of Spinal Tap, it's a fine line between stupid and clever, and it is very, very true. And we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. You see it all the time with ad targeting, with remarketing, where you go to a website and you put something in your shopping cart, or even just poke around, and then you're like, yeah, that's not for me, or you bought a different product or whatever, and then that product follows you around the internet forever like a lost puppy. And you're like, enough with the socks, like my feet are warm now. And it's a real challenge. But of course, as a marketer, you'd be like, well, of course we're going to do that. That's a super effective tactic, and it's really targeted, and it's, we're one-on-one marketing and all the things we preach to be true. But yet as a consumer, you're like, that is not necessarily creepy, but it's certainly annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Although it was creepy at one point. Like I remember, and it's gotten not creepy quickly, 2 years ago, something like that, 2.5 years ago, when my last book came out, my mom called me. I'm actually staying with my mom here this week, and she called me a couple of years ago and said, hey, how come you're advertising your book on a knitting website? And I said, well, it's funny you ask. I'm actually not, but you've been to my site, and I targeted you, and blah, blah, blah. And I had to explain like the whole world of remarketing to my mom, which is interesting. And she's like, oh, that's really kind of creepy. But now we've totally accepted that. Like everybody has enough at-bats with that tactic now. They're like, yeah, that's just the way marketing works now.
I think, yes, I think that we have definitely adapted in terms of that. I think as we, delicately plod forward, there will be somebody who does not really tiptoe into those new domains. And that's where we keep finding the line, right? Is somebody goes and they just do something really, really out of bounds that is just not in our comfort zone yet. And that's how we discover where digital marketing needs to reel itself
right.
in.
People will tell you what the line is if you pay attention, both consumers in general and your own customers. They'll tell you if you're paying attention where the line is. As my friend Gary Vaynerchuk says a lot in his speeches, marketers ruin everything. And there's definitely some truth to that sentiment.
So just by way of closing out this great conversation about digital marketing and digital marketing technology, I want to know where the line is for each of you. Where does it cross the line? Where does it get creepy? Where do you hope we don't go?
I think we've got to use our power for good, not evil. And we have to be very cautious about where big data and the collection of data intersects with people's privacy on elements of data that aren't really relevant to the transaction at hand. For example, we've done a lot of work in the past with social login and social sign-in. I'm a big proponent of social sign-in as a marketing tactic, not requiring your customers or prospective customers to fill out a long form to get your white paper or whatever, but they can just click one button and they can authenticate with their LinkedIn profile, their Google profile, their Twitter profile, their Facebook profile, etc. That your social identity is some sort of identification card, it's a passport. There's plenty of data out there to show that customers in many cases like that technology. It saves them time, it saves them keystrokes, etc. But here's the challenge. When customers authenticate with a social ID, you as the marketer then get access to, in most cases, the entirety of their social profile. So now they're just clicking this Facebook button because they don't want to fill out a form, but now you've got access to all of their high school friends and all the movies they like and all the music they like and all the restaurants they've been to, and this whole panoply of information, which is actually not relevant at all to whatever it is that you're trying to sell them. Now, what a smart marketer will do, or a marketer that doesn't really care about the intersection of privacy and data, is to say, next time we send this person an email, we're going to build it into our marketing automation system so it mentions Toad the Wet Sprocket. And you're like, oh, wait a second. Hey, I like Toad the Wet Sprocket, right? And they're like, yeah, we know, because it was in your Facebook profile. Of course, they wouldn't say that. And so you can start to very cleverly roll personal stuff into business communications. But to me, if the consumer or potential customer figured out where that data came from, that's where a lot of people would draw the line, and probably rightfully so.
Mine is more the pervasiveness, I think. So have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Mm-hmm.
And literally just society, everyday life is completely just bombarded and cluttered and consumed by marketing material, right? Like shows don't even exist. The shows are purely just a 30-minute ad for a particular piece of, what is it, a tub of fat or whatever it was. So that's my biggest fear. That's where where what it is that I'm trying to consume gets overridden by the marketing to get me to continue to consume.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to happen. Marketers ruin everything. I think that is going to. I think that is going to happen. My advice is to go buy land somewhere right now that doesn't have Wi-Fi, that doesn't have utilities.
Going off the grid.
Go off the grid, right? Because someday, if you have land off the grid, you are going to be a hot commodity because people will want to get away. We did some work a couple of years ago with the Wyoming Office of Tourism, and in that program, we did a lot of content and social media stuff about, hey, this is where you go when you don't want to get your emails, right? Like, it's like, and it's like almost like a counter marketing strategy, right? Like Wyoming's the place that doesn't have Wi-Fi, right? Which seems like a crazy marketing strategy, but as we get more pervasive and we're bombarded more and more, you start to think, oh, maybe that is something that I want to do for vacation. I want to do that digital detox that you hear people talk about.
No bars,
I would never
all
do
fun.
that. Yeah, no bars, all fun. That's great. I'm stealing that.
You should. Please do.
I'm stealing that.
I think mine comes from maybe a more of a personal place, but I hope that, people have a real responsibility and respectfulness about kids. My kiddos are exposed to social media via me because they're so darn cute. And I cannot help myself. And I admit that. But there's also part of me that thinks there's a best offense is a good defense. And if I'm defensively creating a record, then it cannot be altered by certain possibilities.
Yeah.
Which is really overthinking posting a picture of but I want to think that there's that people will be really respectful and responsible about what information is available when somebody turns 13, current legal Facebooking age, and then certainly when they become full-fledged adults.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially because you see, as a parent of slightly older children and friends with kids in the same age, it's funny to see parents who will completely disregard that 13-year-old limit and will sign up their 11-year-old or their 12-year-old for a Facebook account and not necessarily recognizing that aspect or that end of it, right? That what you've literally just signed them up for.
Yeah. Wait till you have teenagers like me. They don't even use Facebook anymore.
Yeah,
it's all Snapchat and Instagram and WhatsApp and things that I can't get access to as easily. Because they don't want to hang out in a social network where I am, where I'm actually a big deal. They're like, that's the last thing they want to be a part of. They're like, let's go to Snapchat where Dad's only got like 50 followers.
Yeah, guess what? You've made a life out of being good at that kind of stuff, so you're going to be like that retargeting ad, just following them around.
They know it too. They know it. It's coming.
That's awesome. Well, Jay, thank you so much for your thoughts and perspective on this.
Fun.
It's a great conversation.
Technomics.
My passion, podcasting. Actually, no, it's just talking about
Markenomics.
Yeah.
It's the new show.
It's coming. I'll find some good voices for that one. And I'll have an excellent executive producer over here, Jeremy.
Woo.
I can click buttons like nobody's business.
You're
really
so much more than a button clicker, Jeremy.
Really, really can. All right, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you keep doing that on Technomics.
Thanks for listening. You can find all of our shows on iTunes. Join us next time for another episode of Technomics.